Good day, everyone. My topic is all about the moral deliberation. So, when we say moral deliberation, it is defined by detection, filtering, and weighing of relevant moral principles, heuristic, or concept that identify morally relevant features and thereby create a moral context. Okay, so there is a big difference between a young child's reasoning on the right things to do and the manner of morally mature individual arrives at the ethical decisions. So this necessary growth, which is the maturations in moral reasoning that has been focused on the study of many theories. So one of them is the American psychologist Lawrence Kuberts, who theorized that moral development happens in six stages, which he divided into three levels. So these three levels compose of the pre-conventional levels, the conventional level, and the post-conventional level. Okay, so Lawrence Corbert's stages of moral development. The first is the pre-conventional level. Stage 1 is the punishment and obedience. Punishment and obedience. One is motivated by fear of punishment. He will act in order to avoid punishment. Centers and around obedience and avoidance of punishment. To a young child's mind and action is good. If it's one to escape from punishment, it is called good, and bad if it leads to punishment. One example of this is that Jamie does everything to get passing grades because her mom's promised to him to buy his new phone. So this is what we call reward. So he does everything to get a passing grade so that he will get the reward from his mother. So he follow his mother in order to have the reward. Stage 2 is the mutual benefit. So when we say mutual benefit, it is one is motivated to act by the benefit that one may obtain later. So in this stage, the best example of this is that, for example, Maria lets Hannah copy her math assignment because Hannah also agreed to let her copy during their science test. Okay, the next level, which is the conventional level, the stage 3, social approval. When we say social approval, one is motivated by what others expect in behavior. The individual assumes that will benefit her best is when the other members of her group approve her or her actions. So, one is motivated by what others expect in behavior. So, the person acts, they have value how they appear to others. They give importance on what people will think and say about them. So the best example of this is that Mosendo, or for example, Mosendo allows her classmate to copy her homework so that they will think that she's a nice girl. So that was the best example in this level or in this stage, which is the social approval. Okay, the stage 4 is the law and order. One is motivated to act in order to uphold the law and order. The person will follow the law because it is a law. So, people merely follow the rules and regulations of their institutions. So, they follow because it is a law. So, for example, in school, Jenny wear her school ID inside the campus because she likes to follow the rules and regulation. This is the best example in this stage, which is the law and order. Okay, the post-conventional level, stage 5, social contract. Law that are wrong can be changed. One will act based on the social justice and the common good. So, the individual acts with an understanding the law are created by people coming together for the common good. So, in the social contract, people can change this law if the new demands or conditions arise. The stage 6, the universal principles. This is the associated with the development of one's conscience, having set of standards that drives one to possess moral responsibility to make social changes regardless of consequences to oneself. So the universal principles, we now live in accordance with deeply held moral principles which are seen as more important than the law of the land. Next, the feeling in moral deliberations. Emotions or feelings have long been derided by the purely rationalistic perspective as having no place in properly executed moral decisions. A moral realistic attitude toward decision making is to appreciate the indispensable role emotions have on the agents of choosing. Aristotle precisely points out that moral virtue goes beyond the mere facts of intellectually identifying the right thing to do. So, in the condition of one's character by which the agent is able to manage her emotions or feelings. But, note, Aristotle does not say that remove all feelings. Instead, he says that cultivating one's character lives in learning to manage one feelings. So the emotion are much as reason itself. So, part of what makes a human being. The responsible moral agent din a supposedly dispassionate moral decision maker is an unrealistic ideal. The morally developed or matured individual or agent, therefore, must have honed her intellectual capacity to determine the relevant elements in moral situations, including the moral principles, to determine the relevant elements in a moral situations, including the moral principles to explore. The moral agent realized that is both a product of many forces, elements, and all of which shape her situations and options for a decision. So, as what the popular sayings of a Filipino, tulak ng bibig, kabig ng dibdib. So it is literally means that the mouth says one thing, but the heart drives you to do another things. So this sayings means that what an individual says and in what the sense what an individual mind or intellect dictates one ought to do can times be overcome by what her feelings actually drive her to do. So the passions or feelings do not necessarily distract from making an informed moral decisions. So one can argue that making a moral decisions because it is all about what she values cannot but involve her most serious feelings. So, the moral problems. What must a morally mature individual do when she is confronted with moral problem? In order to answer in this question, we must first understand that there are different types of moral problems. Okay. One, take a potential issue to determine our level of involvement in the case at hand. So, do we need to make a moral decisions in a situation that needs action in our part? Or are we trying to do the right things in a particular situations that being discussed? In the latter situations, we may be making moral judgment in a particular case, but one does not necessarily involve ourselves. We may just be reading about the case that involves other people, but we are not the part of that case. So, number two, make sure of the facts. So, the first to establish the fact is the whether we face with a moral situations or not. And number three, identify all the people who may potentially be affected by the implications of a moral implication or by our concrete choice of action. So, people are called stakeholders in the particular case. Identifying the stakeholders forces us to give the considerations to people aside from ourselves. So, um, after establishing the facts and identifying the stakeholders and their concerns in the matter, we now identify the ethical issues at hand. There are the several types of ethical problem or issues. The first one is the situation in which we need to clarify whether a certain action is morally right and wrong. The second types involve determining whether a particular actions in questions can be identified with a generally accepted ethical or unethical actions. And the third type points to the presence of an ethical dilemma. Dilemma are ethical situations in which are competing values that seems to have equal worth. The final step, of course, is for individual to make her ethical conclusions or decisions, whether in judging what ought to be done in a given case or in coming up with a concrete actions she must actually performs. Real ethical decisions are often very enough to make and so many different reasons. The moral agent must be able to learn how to avoid the seduction of surrendering the blind simplifications. A moral individual is always being whose intellectual remains finite and whose passions remains dynamic and who is always placed in situations that are unique. Okay, that's all for today's, and that's what the end of my report, which is the moral deliberations. So, as the reviewed to my report, Lawrence Koberts is the one of the American moral psychologists who is theorized the 6 stages of moral development, which is composed of the 3 level, which is the pre-conventional level, the stage 1, the obedience and punishment, and the stage 2, the mutual benefit. Then the second level is the conventional level, which is composed of stage 3, which is the social approval and the law of order. And the last, the post-conventional level, is composed of stage 5, which is the social contact and the universal principles. So that's all for my report. Thank you so much and have a nice day.